Hello GameMakers, this is GameMaker Rob, and in today's episode we have the ability to choose which units go into battle. We can add our new soldiers like fighters and archers into it. We can move existing mandatory characters into a different spot. We can remove non-mandatory characters from the army, but the ones that are mandatory for the mission cannot be removed. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you is we have a new sprite. As you can see, there are two images. We have this white image this is going to show a tile we clicked on for swapping units around, and this image here is going to be when we are moving around between the spawn tiles, so we can choose a unit to move or get rid of, or to add from the reserve. I'll put this sprite in a link in the description box as usual, in case you don't want to do one yourself. The next thing we are going to do first of all is we have updated our script SCR change option. Originally this script just dealt with increments of 1, so if you press left it'll go left once, if you press right it'll go right once, up and down will be minus or +1 as well, but I needed to update it for use with the spawn tiles, because if you press up or down I want to increase or decrease by 4. So with that in mind, we have a new variable called increment that we're going to pass to it. Like I said, it's just the amount to increase or decrease the value by. This was our previous code for adding to the value. This is the new code. Same here, this is the old code for adding or removing, and this is the new code. The gist of it is, if we're adding to the value, whatever the difference is between the current value and max value, say for example current value is 7, max value is 5, that's going to return 2, but then you minus 1 from it, so it's going to equal 1, and then we just add the difference, whatever that equals, to the minimum, and that's going to be the new value. And it's the same for this really. So yeah, what we have to do now is, because we have changed the script, we're going to need to update it in the shop and the army screen. A quick way to do this is if you press Control, Shift and F and you type SCR change option and then find all, and you can see in the output, the search results, all the results for that search. So anywhere that it says army screen shop, we have to update it. So double click on army screen. All we need to add to it is a 1, because the increment is going to be 1. If you look at the bottom left, you can see it's asking for the increment, it's highlighted. So that's all we need to add here. Same for this line. We're in the step event of the army screen object. So line 4, line 5, line 8, they just need a number 1 adding to the end after a comma. That's those 3. And then player step, we forgot about that one. So line 147, player step, again we're adding 1 to it because it's increments of 1. Then in the shop, step event, all of these just need a 1 adding at the end. There you go. You can see in my search results I've got OBJ test as well, but I don't think you guys have seen that bit yet. You're going to see it in this episode. So as long as you have updated army screen, player and shop with the new variable, then you're good to go. Okay, so if we go into the test object, OBJ test, at the bottom we have our states. We have a new one called display reserve. This is going to be used, say for example, when we click on a spawn tile in our pre-battle screen, that's empty, then any units that aren't currently in the battle, we get to choose one of those to put in that spot. That's all it's for, really. Down here, selected option. So that's just the same as we've used it in the army screen and the shop, just to change between options. Previous selected option, this is useful for when we switch from between choose units and display reserve. Previous selected option is going to remember where this variable used to be, because we're going to be using this one for all the states, but we want to go back to the previous value for before we switch to states. That's what this is used for. Reserve list is going to hold all the units that aren't currently in the battle. If we add a unit to the battle, then it takes one away. If we remove a unit from the battle, then it adds one. We also have a check to see using a mandatory list. This is going to hold all the units that have to take part in the battle. If you remember, when we edit our missions, we're able to change the value of is mandatory to either 1 or 0. If that value is 1, then the unit's going to be added to the mandatory list when we set up the battle. And if we try and remove that unit from the spawn tiles, it won't work because it'll check to see if that unit exists in this list. If it does, then we are not allowed to remove it. Temp list. What we're going to be doing is with spawn tile list, rather than saving the unit numbers to it, we're just going to be saving the list that has that spawn tile, and we're just going to be updating those lists, which are the same lists that are going to be used by the terrain data. The only thing is, if we have when we want to copy or transfer data between two lists, we need to save one of them in a temporary list so we can overwrite one of the other lists with it. If we don't do that, it kind of makes it impossible. So that's all this is for. We only use it one time. Okay, so let's get into the step event now. So end step event. We don't touch the conversation, but what we did do is we added an else statement. This is just because inside the conversation we're checking for pressing enter, and that happens elsewhere in here as well. So we want to separate the checks for enter. That's why every state is going to be within an else statement. So we've updated the setup battle. This region here is new. We're going to deal with this first. So we're going to clear our reserve list just to make sure there's nothing from a previous battle in there. And then all we're going to do is we are going to run through our global.character stats grid. We're going to check every unit. Player unit is either going to be a 0 or a 1. If it equals 1, then it's a player unit, and that means we're going to add it to the reserve list. This also adds characters that are already in the battle, so we're going to be getting rid of them in a minute. So here we're going to clear the mandatory list as well, for the same reasons that we clear the reserve list, just to make sure it's empty for this bit. So within our double for loop, this used to be the code here for, we used to just get the unit of the list, but instead we're going to add the whole list to spawn tile list. This comment here is basically what I just said in the create event. So we should say remove it from the reserve list. So basically this check here, if there's a unit on that spawn tile, then we need to remove it from the reserve list. So parse is going to find the position in the reserve list where the unit exists, and then we're just going to delete it from the reserve list. We also need to add a character to the mandatory list if it is mandatory. So that's what this check is going to do. And that's what allows us to prevent removing characters from the battle screen. if it's mandatory. Then this state here, if state equals choose units, is new. So we're just going to grab the size of the spawn tile list. I'd recommend having only 8 spawn tiles in your maps for now, because that's what I've coded for. I haven't coded for different amounts of spawn tiles. It shouldn't be too hard to do that, but for now it may cause some problems, so just a little warning in advance. So here we're going to cycle between our spawn points with right or left. You can see the increment that we do is 1 for pressing left or right. This is where we switch between our 8 tiles. If we press up or down, then we want to this is going to be a value of 4, so we could just type 4 here, but I decided just to facilitate future coding where we have different amounts of spawn tiles, just to use this instead. And then here, if you press enter, then first of all, have we already clicked on a tile? So we may have already pressed on a tile already. For example, if we want to swap something, if we have already pressed enter on a tile, then previous selected option would be from 0 to 7. So if it's not equal to -1, then it's equal to 0, between 0 and 7. So this is where we're going to be using our temp list. So temp list is going to store the contents of the list in the tile that we just clicked. And then we're going to copy over the previous tile with the new tile list. So we're just copying over the data, and then the information we just stored in the temporary list, we're going to be saving back in the other one. So I'm just going to show a quick video of this happening, just so there's like a visual clue. And if I also show you the data that we're copying over, it might make more of a sense. Is it in the editor? I think it is actually. Yeah, it's hard. Basically, this is the data we're copying over between each list. And this saves us having to do a whole big code block of updating terrain data, because the lists are already there. They're already the same lists. We are literally just saving the indexes of the lists within spawn tile list. So anyway, after we've copied the lists to each other, we're just going to reset previous selected option. If previous selected option equals -1, then we're going to be in this bit here. So they're pressing enter for the first time, basically. So grab the list, check what unit is inside the list. If the unit is empty, then it's an empty tile. This is when we want to show the reserve list. We only want to show the reserve list, however, if there's actually units to place. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen visually, but it's very weird, basically. So we only want this to happen if there's units to show. So anyway, if there are units within the reserve list, set the state to display reserve. Previous selected option is going to store where selected option used to be, and then we're going to reset selected option to 0. Otherwise, if there is a unit in that spot already, then we're going to be moving that unit to somewhere else, and if it's a blank tile, then basically whatever is on the tile we're moving it to is going to be moved back to the previous tile, and that's when this stuff happens. It's swapping data between tiles. So if it's not an empty tile, then this is when we're going to store a selected option in previous selected option, and then press enter again. This happens. Okay, so this one here is another new region. If we press backspace, then if it's not a mandatory unit, we're going to put that unit back into the reserve list. So grab the list first of all as normal. Unit to remove is whatever is stored in the unit there. If there's actually a unit, this actually should be greater than e characters dot leave empty. So if it's greater than leave empty, so it's going to be one or more, that means there's a unit there. If it's a mandatory unit, then it would return a value greater than -1. If it's not mandatory, it will return -1. So if it's not mandatory, all this is going to happen. We're going to add a unit to remove back to reserve list, and we're just going to clear a couple of values for that list. We're going to set the unit to leave empty, and we're going to say must survive to 0, just to make sure that's done. If you press space, this is going to launch the battle. Well, it's going to show the conversation first. So we're just going to use our center on speaker script, because we may have moved the mandatory character just to a different spot. So we just want to recenter it again, and then change the state to conversation. And then this state here is for displaying the reserve. If we press left or right, then we just want to go up or down 1 using our awesome change option script, becoming very useful. If we press enter in this state, then we're basically choosing a unit to add to the spawn tiles, which means we need to update the list for that cell. So we're going to grab the list. We're going to set the unit to whatever the unit is in the reserve list. We're going to say it's not AI controlled. It doesn't have to survive the battle because it's not mandatory. And it's going to have a facing of south. And then just remove it from the reserve list and just reset the variables. And that's going to be it for the step event. So we have a small change in the draw event. All we do is, instead of show map, we're just going to show it if we are in a conversation or in battle. And one silly mistake that I noticed, I don't exactly know when I made this mistake, but within draw cell and within the unit region, this line here, line 66, we have var car grid equals global.character stats unit to draw. So I've no idea why this didn't give me errors before, but global.character stats is a grid and we're accessing it like it's a list. This is what it should say. I only discovered it because I was trying to bug fix something familiar. And that's it for the draw event. And last of all for today is the draw GUI region. Okay, so we have updated this line to say if choose units or display reserve, because we want to display those spawn tiles in this state as well as this state. Inside the choose units region, so previously we had this line for grabbing the unit, but now we have to grab the list from the spawn tile list and then grab the unit from that. That's what these two lines here are going to do. These two. And then this here is new. So we're going to show which character is about to be moved with another. So if the state is choose units and previous selected option is greater than -1, it means we've pressed enter on something and it wasn't an empty tile basically. And also we've got to check the counter this value is equal to that. So as long as all these conditions are true, we're going to draw the second index of SBR ISO select, which is this one. So this is going to be the first tile that we select that we want to move somewhere else. And then this second region here, display the selection cursor. So if we are in this state and selected option equals counter, so this is before we've pressed enter for the first time, or we could have pressed enter and this region will be running with the white selection box. And in this case, we want to use the golden one for choosing the second place, which is what this check's going to be for. So as long as one of these two conditions, this or this, is true, then we're going to draw the first sprite, the first index, this one here, move it around. And that's it for these two new regions here. And then we've got a brand new region. If we are displaying the reserve, don't need this, let's delete it. So set scale to 3, get the unit width and height, a scaled version of it. We're going to draw them from the top left, and we're just going to use a for loop to go through the whole of our reserve list, which is going to hold any units that are not currently in the battle. We're going to set draw X. We're going to grab the unit that we're supposed to be drawing, and then use our useful script to draw it. And then if I equals selected option, so if we've pressed up, down, left or right to get to it, then we're just going to draw our army selection box to show this is the currently selected character. And that should be it. If we run the game, we can see all this working as normal. Let's do a couple of things first of all. Let's go to the army screen. Let's make sure that our scripts that we changed at the start is still working. And then go to the shop. We're going to buy some units. Let's buy 3 fighters and 3 archers. You see up and down still works. And you can see the on the top left there was some debugging stuff going on. Select option. You don't need that. I was just checking the value was working. Okay, so we've just bought 3 fighters and 3 archers. We can see them here, and because I'm just drawing them for as long as the list is, we can see the stats being drawn over them, but that's something we'll change in the future. Just now, I bought 4 fighters, sorry, not 3. We've got our 3 main characters, 4 fighters, and 3 archers. So now, if we go to the first battle, we're greeted with our screen, and we can see we've got our selection box. We can move it around like this. If I click on butts, then you can see he has the white selection box. Let's move him to the back, and then if we click on an empty one here, we can see our reserve list. Let's choose a fighter to go here. Let's pick another fighter for there. Let's put an archer there. If we choose Sarah and press backspace, nothing happens because she's mandatory. If we go to the archer and press backspace, let's actually, first of all, let's see how many archers are left. So we've got 2 archers and 2 fighters. So if we press backspace on the archer and press enter again, then we have 1, 2, 3 archers and 2 fighters. A couple of things that we're missing is we can't backspace out of the reserve list, and we're not sorting the list. That's a couple of things I'll do for next time. A couple of easy fixes. So let's just put an archer back there again, and we'll put another fighter here. and one more archer at the back, like so. And last thing we'll do is we'll swap butts with this fighter. So as long as this is all working the same for you, then we are good to go. So let's press space, and we see the knight says stop right there, but is now in a different place, but the screen has centered on it properly. There's Sarah again, the knight, Brian, and that's as far as we get. So the next stage would be to have a battle, I guess. So we'll have some kind of intro where it says battle, and then we will probably do some A-star pathing. That's basically detects where a unit can move. So I think that's what we're going to do for next time. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Any comments, please leave them below. Until then, I will catch you next time. Bye for now.